outlier center spread? We were here. Yeah, we ended by talking about standard deviation. And we said that standard deviation, our interpretation of it, was average distance from the mean. And in a similar way to mean and median, we can talk about two different measures of spread we have to choose from. We've got interquartile range, and we have standard deviation. And in a similar way to the mean and median, we're going to look at the spread of the distribution and take a look at does our list have a lot of outliers or extremely high or extremely low values? And if it does, then that means that the standard deviation, just like the mean, is going to be thrown off by it. Remember, we did our 23 billion. And in a similar way, the standard deviation is going to be thrown off by that as well. So if we have a lot of outliers, or if we have a really skewed distribution, then we want to use interquartile range. Because the interquartile range doesn't care about where those extremely high or extremely low numbers are, because it uses Q1 and Q3 in its formulas. So it's a more resistant measure, just like median is a more resistant measure. So this means that if we're describing shape outlier center spread, standard deviation is going to be connected with the mean, and we're going to use it when we have a symmetric distribution that doesn't have a lot of outliers. Then mean and standard deviation is the more technically accurate measurement. So if we can use it, if there aren't a lot of outliers or skewness, then we will. We're going to use mean, and we're going to use standard deviation. If we have a lot of skewness, though, or any outliers, then we want to use the median and the interquartile range, because those are the more resistant measures to that skewness and outliers. So in other words, what we use to measure center and spread is determined by the shape. That's why we usually figure out what the shape is first. That's why we do shape, outliers, then center and spread. Because what our shape is and what the outliers are is going to determine what we use for center and spread. So let's put that all together and come up with a way to describe a distribution. Let's do an example together. We'll do one together, and then I'll have you try one on your own. That's what we're going to do. Shape. Is this symmetric or skewed? It's skewed. In which direction is it skewed? I'm going to do something fancy. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to turn it. This is generally what our shape looks like. That is skewed so that the tail that's causing the skewness is on the left-hand side. So this is a skewed left distribution. So, skewed left. Which means if we have a skewed distribution, that means that for center, we're going to use the median. For spread, we're going to use IQR if we have a skewed distribution. So let's take a look at that. Median, what's the median? Should be MED. 76. IQR Q3 minus Q1. Give me those. What's Q3? 88. Minus Q1 is 65.5. So that means our IQR, interquartile range, what was this? That's a 5, okay. There we go. My first two guesses of what the number was were not correct when I was trying to read my own handwriting. On a roll today. Subtract, what do we get? Should be 22.5. So that's our interquartile range. So that's what we're going to use for center and spread. Outliers, well, we need to do 1.5 times IQR. Times 22.5, which equals 33.7? 0.75. So that's going to be our boundary that we're going to look. So we're going to take Q3, which was 88, and add that 1.5 times IQR, which will equal 121.75. So anyone that scored above 121.75% is an outlier. We have any of those? We wish. All right. But unfortunately, they did not. Lower quartile, 65.5. And we're going to subtract that 1.5 times the interquartile range. This is going to give us the lower boundary. Anything below this is going to be an outlier. 33.75. Yes? Okay. 31.75. Anything below 31.75 is an outlier. Do we have one of those? Yes, we do. $12 is an outlier. All right. So that means I'm going to give you about a minute or two. I want you to take this information, and we don't just want to go shape outlier center spread and write this. Plus, we have almost no context to the problem. We need to put some labels on these answers. We need to talk about it in terms of what we're measuring. We need to turn these into sentences. So you don't need to write it down, but I want to give you a minute to think about how you would take this information. These are the things you need to say. You need to bring in some context to the problem. How would you take this and turn it into sentences? Let me give you these because we've already done this before. So the distribution of test scores is skewed to the left with a median score. Again, we're talking about context, so we have test scores and median score. The interquartile range, so now we're talking about spread, of the distribution is Q3 minus Q1. We're showing how it's calculated. To test for outliers, we'll test 1.5 times IQR. We did it. Since 12% falls below 31.75, we will consider it an outlier.